Meeting. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Gustafson. Here. Keen.
Here, and I can hear you.
Alco.
Here.
Petty. Here. Clock.
Here.
Done.
Here.
Thank you.
And clerk, I'm here as well and I can hear you.
Thank you. Approval of minutes, 3.1, approval of the minutes from the October 4th, 2022 committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Motion by trustee Keen, second by trustee Malco. Any discussion on the minutes? Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Gustafson.
Yes.
Petty. Yes. Dunn.
Yes.
Clock.
Yes.
Malco.
Yes.
Keen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 4, public comment. Anyone present wish to speak? I don't think we have anyone else online, Joe, right? No one's jumped in on this. We'll slide into new business. 5.1 is discussion or recommendation to the board for approval of final plat number 1 of the Villas of Rose Way. If you look up on the screen, the area we are talking about is that undeveloped loop. The loop that's Blue Stem, Bainberry, and Prairie Rose, northwest of the Schnooks. That has been that was part of a we call it a CPD, but a PUD, a plan unit development, plan use development. It was always planned to be multifamily. And one of the, I think in the packet, this went through ZBA back in March, I believe. And this represents a tremendous reduction in development density from what had originally been proposed. You know, right out, as you can see out there, the buildings that are there now are 5, 6, 7, 8 unit buildings. I think there's a 10 unit building out there somewhere. It was going to be more of the same. We've entertained a number of development proposals over the year. One entity got pretty far down the road with it last year, far enough down the road with showing a new proposed build out using only duplexes rather than these long multifamily units. And apparently they were good enough at their job that they convinced the owner that it was plausible to develop. So this was Dennis Gilligs, still essentially owns all of this. He was the original developer of all of this property. He withdrew the sale and he's developing it himself. So if you recall, that if you've seen out there, 2 of the units are already, this has already been through design review at the ZBA, again, some time ago. And the only 2 lots that could, the only 2 buildings that could essentially proceed because they were unaffected by the proposed changes in layout that would necessitate this new plat, were these 2, buildings 1 and 2. They're tucked in the corner of Blue Stem Road. I think Pizza Ranch is right here. And then Rose Way is built just to the end right now of that interior island. Rose Way is a private drive, not a public street. Blue Stem is public. Since this is completely locked by existing roadways in the building and remains the same from one plat to the next, we issued zoning permits and the county issued building permits on these 2. They're under construction right now. But obviously we did the change in development pattern from what had been originally platted necessitated whole new recordings of easements, abandoning of old easements, dedication of new easements. We literally brought to the table the water department, Four River Sanitation, the fire department. Everyone's been part of this design process. But they finally now gotten us the plat with all of those easements to record. This would pave the way for the construction of the rest of the duplexes. That the plat is what's before you tonight.
I make a motion, we send it on to the board.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a set motion or a second. Are there any other questions? These were in the packet, but while they're duplexes, there are 3 different unique, they have similar architectural styling, but 3 different sizes and 3 different footprints. This is one of the units up on the screen. I think that's another one. And that's a 3rd one. Some of them have front and side, a combination of front and side loading garages. Some have dual fronts. And then there's a comprehensive landscape plan submitted.
Does the developer have a ambitious timeline for proceeding with these?
Doesn't sound like it. They are clear, they are now anxious to proceed with a few more, at least. I suspect that they'll submit permits on 3, 4, and 5 yet this year to maybe get those foundations dug. But this has been described as a multi-year build out.
That private drive, can that ever be made public?
Nope. It cannot. There's no way they would be able to, it does not comply with building setbacks. So for example, if I go right here, if this is a private drive, this will be rows away going through the development. If this were public right of way, first of all, it'd be in a 60-foot right of way,
Yes.
which would be offset significantly from those back of curbs. And then we'd still have another 30-foot building setback line. So, construction couldn't start to well offset from that road if it were a public street. So no, because it's a private drive, they're allowed to build in such a way that they're closer to the street than we would allow. And of course, they maintain responsibility for these roads. We will never plow them or repair them or do anything to them. This is being built to our urban standard build. This is curb and gutter, 30-foot width.
And how are these units going to get their mail?
It's a
Mail bank or individual? I mean, I don't.
They already have cluster boxes out there.
Okay.
So I assume it'll be, no, you know what? I do know. They're gonna do a cluster box at the end of each side access.
Okay.
That's how they're gonna do it. Whether they're riding lawnmowers to get in, I do not know.
I just didn't want to have
I
to
know.
listen to more constituents say
Yep.
they want a mailbox at the end of the driveway.
Are they gonna pay into the school district for this building?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think-
Okay, any further questions? The clerk, will you call the roll?
Dunn,
Yes.
Malaco,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Keen,
Yes.
Gustafson,
Yes,
Teddy. Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0. 5.2, discussion or recommendation to the board regarding establishing the tax levy amount. Technically, it's confusing. It's for 2022, but it would be the 2023 revenues. These would be 2022 property taxes collected in 2023. This is, we obviously, this is something you vote on every year at one of the earlier stages of the budget process. What's interesting is that normally we have to take an early action, which, Joe, I do think we'll have to take relatively soon. But we have to hold what's called a truth in taxation hearing if the tax will exceed 5%. Joe, while I fix this, finish that thought for me.
This is the first year in probably 15 years that this is even an option. If we levy more than 5% than we did last year, we're required to do a truth and taxation hearing. We haven't, because of the PTAL, because of the tax caps, we haven't even been able to, be allowed to even have the option of levying more than 5% in the previous year for the last, I don't know how long, 15 years, probably 10 years, 15 years.
It's been a
A
move.
while. So this is the first year that that's even an option. So the numbers, I'm sure Scott's got them there, but if we do decide to go higher than that, we'll have to publish, there's publication requirements, public hearing requirements. So we do sort of have to decide how much, or at least if we're gonna go over that 5% from last
So
year.
just so you know what's happening in the draft, the first draft, Trustee Gulfson asked a question about this last time, but for the first draft, Steve had included, I think, a 5% increase in the property tax. And that's distributed, and I have not gone back. Obviously, this is a draft budget. This is still something you have to vote on. So please don't assign anything to the fact that it's in there now. It's what we had done the past couple of years, and it was how Steve set up the revenues. And I was not about to try to go through, the property tax is distributed a number of different places in the budget. It's not just one chunk. And I wasn't going to go back and try to reconcile all those again. So it still is in there. The property tax revenues in the first draft of your budget do reflect a 5% increase in the levy. I know I don't know that I want to go down the rabbit hole. I know it's a complicated concept we've discussed before. Increasing the levy is not synonymous with increasing a tax rate. But it is collecting a larger pot of money from year to year, and it's usually based on a CPI adjustment, but it also can be a result of growth.
Well, also new construction, only thing I'll say about that is, I was surprised, but we had a little over $1 million in new construction this year.
Yeah.
Which is one of the higher
Yeah.
amounts we've had in several years.
So again,
Can we say inflation?
pardon?
Can we say inflationary pressures on construction costs?
Well, this is the comment that I always make to, I don't know, to you guys or to anyone that'll listen, whenever the conversation comes up, is that I think people in general support the concept of growth, and with growth, there's an expectation of increased tax revenue. Oh, good, we got this new business built, a new big thing that's going to generate tax dollars for the community. Oh, there's a bunch of new homes, they'll generate more tax revenue. We can't realize that. We can't collect. The levy is essentially saying, here's the total amount of money that we're going to collect. And then that total amount is equated out to what individual property owners pay. We have increased our levy, taken the allowable increase in the levy. People's tax rates have still dropped just because there was growth. There was more people paying in. So I understand all sides of this. I honestly do. But the argument, the position I always try to make is, I guess I'm just being repetitive at this point. We say that growth is good. We say that we'd like to increase the tax base. You can't realize that you can't get the additional money without adjusting the levy. That said, you wise souls get to vote on it. So right now we just have it on as a discussion. It does have to, the levy discussion probably has to move forward to the board separately and on a quicker schedule than approving the whole budget in general, correct?
So what was the amount of the levy last year?
I think he has the whole levy history, in there.
Last year it was
What- what are you looking
1,521,000.
Are you looking at something that we have here?
Section 2, second to last page of section 2.
Second to the last page.
Well, maybe 3 back. Revenues received from property taxes last 12 years. Section 3, it's the last subsection there before you get into wages, benefit comparisons. So
You say 3 or 2?
section 2. I don't know what I said. I meant section 2.
Third from the last page?
Fourth from the last.
Or with the yellow.
Yellow would show the 5% increase. Yes, the yellow's on there. The column next to it is no increase. So you can see the total amount, the total levy going back over the years. Last year was 1.521 million. Before that, 1.493. Before that, 1.454. So obviously, not accepting any levy increase at all would keep it at 1,521,049. Taking the 5% increase would bump that up to 1,597,101.
Well, we know some individuals' homes will experience increased assessments due to the inflationary pressures of home buying over the last year. So the dollar amount that the individual homeowner pays is based on all of those factors, the assessed value, as well as the aggregate of all the taxing bodies
Correct.
and their levies.
That's accurate.
It did show on that schedule how the property tax rate has decreased every year, probably for the last 8 years that have been on there, so.
Right, the rate may go down,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
amount that people actually pay goes up.
Correct.
And that's what people look at.
Oh, but in years when their fair market value increases, yes, which is the cycle we're in now, and from, I don't know, 2008 through 15, it's probably the opposite trend. in the big picture, what we, the village, do isn't felt significantly on the bill because we're such a small part of it. Doesn't mean that that's not absolving us of any role in the decision-making process, but just no one's gonna feel much of a burden or benefit because we're such a small part of the bill.
It's symbolic.
It's symbolic. It's exactly.
Is there some decision you need tonight, or we just digest?
We could digest it, or you could make a motion to, because this would, I think this needs to move on to the board before, you know,
November 15th, I think is the schedule.
when is it?
The November 15th board meeting, I think is what the idea is for,
Well, then I guess,
I mean, you're gonna need it before that,
yeah,
yes.
so I guess I do need a motion
We'll get early.
because our next board meeting is November 1 and then November 15.
All right, I'll put it out there. I make a motion that we keep the levy flat and levy what was collected in last go around. That's $1,521,049. And if we do that, we don't need our special hearing. Correct?
Correct. Although if we took the 5% exactly, we would not have to have it anyway, Joe. We could take up to 7%.
Yeah, the way it looked like it was up to 1.597.
Yeah.
Why would we want to do that?
Right.
Looking at like a $75,000.
Why would we want to do that?
Some numbers are correct.
There is right now a motion to keep the levy flat and not take the increase from trustee Gustafson. Or to move that recommendation to the board anyway. Is there a second? Hearing none, I'll ask if there's an alternate motion. Well, this is it.
I'll make a motion, we send the 5% to the board. That requires no hearing, right?
That is correct.
And it's what we've done in previous years,
Correct. Well, there's been years we haven't.
not all years, but previous years,
Some.
some
Yeah.
years.
Yes.
Let's get this one flies.
Okay. Is there a second to that? The motion now is to recommend to the board to take a 5% increase to the total tax levy for the village of Roscoe. Is there a second?
I'll second it. We got more houses that are gonna be built next year.
We do.
We can help out.
I think we probably had our discussion. Clerk, will you call this again? Vote is to recommend to the board for approval of a 5% increase to the village of Roscoe tax levy. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Dunn,
Yes.
Petty, no, Gustafson,
No,
Flock,
Yes.
Malaco,
Yes.
Keen,
Yes.
Motion approves 4-2. All right, 5.3, presentation of the first draft of the village of Roscoe for 2023. Everyone just got it today. It's fresh off the presses. We have a hard copy in binder form, and all of the information in here is in your board packet as well. Should you want to do this electronically. I tried to separate, and we did separate it into the same binder sections here is how it's put together in the board packet. So you'll see section 1 through section 7. I'll tell you that given the time that we've started this, we're about 3 weeks ahead of last year's, which is good. But Steve and I, this represents a complete presentation to you of our anticipated revenues and our proposed expenditures. What Steve and I still need to work on is end of year fund balances across the board. That plays a role largely in me knowing how much money we would have to transfer from the general fund to the capital fund. It plays a role in determining our reserve policy, because that will look at the difference between revenues and expenses, but it also takes into account, it starts with the fund balance on December 31st of 2022. So there are some pieces of the puzzle, and you'll see as you look through the actual budget itself, when I get to that section, I think I say, you know, disregard requires year-end fund balance. That picture will clear itself up certainly by the next meeting, if not, you know, if not by the next meeting, by the end of November. What I will now just kind of quickly call your attention to, though, is big ticket items. I don't want to gloss over anything else. Please read these as I've done in years past. I encourage you to reach out with comments or suggestions. I got some stuff from Dustin actually a couple months ago, and I've included them throughout here. They're big picture things. So a lot of them are looking at a 10-year window of development and commitment. Some of them have to do with parks, and I've included it with the park section in here. The other two are more closely aligned with capital projects, so they're included in the capital section here. Some of the stuff we're kind of pursuing already anyway. I think, you know, he had some thoughts on advancing some pathway projects. Almost all of those are going to be joint projects with the county. And we are looking into trying to seek funding for the design of one, connect to the western subdivisions along a path along Roscoe Road and a pedestrian bridge. But again, that'll have to be a joint effort between us and the county. It's their right of way. But for kind of big ticket projects, in the Parks Department budget, that's where a lot of these reside. Right now, we're proposing a new dock system at Riverside Park. I think we've had a little bit of trouble dialing in specific quotes right now, but I think $50,000 is an educated placeholder. Is that accurate to say at this point, Troy?
Correct.
Troy, I did not include you showed me a photo one time, or just the other day, of a system that was sort of the goal. And it would be great. It's just a better, safer system, but it would be one that could fluctuate with rising and falling water levels. It had a much longer gangway. It was hinged. You had the floating portions of the dock that could go up and down, and the gangway would either be at the water's edge or it could be up on land when the river's low. It doesn't matter. It's still safe access. Right now, we have to go physically move the dock every time the water rises or falls because we don't have that kind of a system. I don't think I have the picture in here, so I'll get a copy of the photo he had of it. I think that's good visual that you can use in contemplating this moving forward. I'm still trying to get the splash pad equipment purchased this year, much like the Chicory Ridge Playground. There's going to be end of season fire sales. And so I got my eye on, so we'll bring it forward to you, but I got my eye on a couple of different packages. A lot of these things come in packages of 4 or 5 different pieces of equipment. So I would still propose that we buy the equipment this year and then put out to bid the installation next year. It is something we applied for a grant. If we get it, great. I'm going to tell you we're not. It's the least optimistic of any of the grants we did. It's for a number of reasons, it's just not going to be an attractive OSLAD grant. I don't want to digress on that too far, but just to let you know, this was the first year that the OSLAD program, which is Open Space, Land Acquisition and Development, Recreation Grant. It had a category, it was acknowledging disadvantaged communities, and it predefined those disadvantaged communities before. Like it said, if you were one or not, or not. I always say Roscoe falls into that gray zone and stuff. Like I always equate it like to parents trying to seek funding for a kid going to school. You make just enough that you can't qualify for any financial assistance, but you don't make enough to make it easy. And that's sort of where we are. Our demographics are such that we never fall into these categories that would warrant us getting additional assistance or being disadvantaged. Our unemployment numbers, our median incomes are high enough, but we're also not Geneva. We're not just so flush with tax revenue that money is no object. But not only in the OSLAD, that's normally a 50-50 split. Not only do the disadvantaged communities qualify for a 100% funding level, it is my understanding that they will be prioritized throughout. Now, that 100% funding commitment has a specific limit to it. There's only so much of the pool that will be allocated as 100% contribution. However, through the full award of all the money, disadvantaged communities are going to have priority. And that's going to work against us. Also, I know from experience that the OSLA grant looks for the largest variety of recreation or play components possible. You'll see people throw horseshoes and stuff in there just to say, hey, there's one more thing that we're doing. And while we did submit the Porter Park expansion, and that has more components to it. That's a long way of saying, I don't expect grant funding necessarily on that Leland, at least not for next year. Anyway, I reduced that down to $107,000. I think I took $80,000 of equipment out of it. Troy's been looking at, we've been encouraging him here, and you'll see in Justin's communications to really start taking a holistic view of all the parks and really just establishing a timeline for immediate and expected improvements. He's identified some improvements to the baseball diamonds themselves. I think it's about $5,000 each for 3 diamonds. We put that in as $15,000. Porter Park expansion still sits at the same price as last year of $250,000. Just so you know, the cost estimate I submitted with the grant was significantly more than that. Because I threw some more things into the grant application beyond even the exhibit that you have here. There's a creek that runs through that property, and there's a lot of land on the other side. And I know that the disc golf community has big eyes to go use that other side of the creek because it's heavily wooded, and that's what they like. They like to throw through obstacles. So I put in the project scope and in the cost estimate for the OSLA grant application, I put a whole nother pedestrian bridge in there at $200,000. I don't have that in this. This would still be developing essentially the open acreage and the immediate tree line, all that's visible from McDonald Road. Same exhibit from last year, actually, in that. That is where that path system is where we would likely include those fitness stations as well. And we are long overdue for some decent picnic tables. So this actually falls into equipment rather than a development, but Troy's looking at, no, I don't remember the total number, but there's a lot of picnic table replacement and some nice, in some areas where we're gonna anticipate, like here at Village Halls, we've been having food truck Fridays more regularly instead of having a hall. Tables here, we're looking at some of the octagon shaped ones that sort of have that PVC coating over the metal. It's a little nicer picnic table options. I'm going to direct you to capital projects, which is I think item 7 in your binder. Because these are big. Residential streets. We're going to have money. We're going to be in a good position. You've heard Steve read off the fund balances. There's some big end of the year expenses coming, but we're gonna be rolling forward a healthy general fund balance, and revenues were still solid this year. I think revenues for 7 million, north of 7 million. What you see right now is a recommendation. First page of this section 7 is an updated 5-year streets plan recommendation from Fairgraham. What they're recommending for 2023 is a large amount of work in Sagewood that comes to $847,000. Obviously, we commit $490,000 a year to the residential streets program by resolution. This is significantly expanding upon that, almost doubling it. There's a map that follows that up as well. I think that the entire, not only does next year's scope merit further discussion, and I want us to have that. I want you to start looking, I want your opinions on all 5 years. These are data driven, and I think I'm gonna have Troy probably do at an upcoming meeting, maybe more of a formal presentation about each one of these, why they got their spot in line, what their current condition is, and what your recommended approach. But this is a thought out breakdown of what 5 years could be. The next page are just supplement more stuff. It's just more. It's the honorable mention list, if you would, or more things to consider. And I have actually put into the budget right now as a starting place, adding in that whole top box, the downtown section, so Chestnut Street, Broad Street, Harrison Street, which is an additional 819, 836. So you'll see right now, the capital budget is including $1.7 million in residential road reconstruction for next year. That's the first draft suggestion. Beyond residential streets, every year I'm gonna keep tossing it out there. It's not urgent, but it will be someday. The parking lot on the other side of the creek. I'm gonna throw it in there for discussion every single year. I just am. When we get to the Main Street reconstruction, and we will get there, it might be 5 years from now, but we will get there. We will lose on-street parking. We will have to convert from these diagonal stalls to parallel parking in a lot of the areas. We're gonna lose the on-street public parking count, and I think we're gonna have to make that up with some off-street parking. And this is a location where we could start to do something like that. There are others, but not to be discussed publicly at this time. So, that's still $100,000 project. There is still, I check every year, there is still willingness to do that in a public-private partnership with Bob Prosser. His willingness is to purchase the land and donate it to the village. We would build the parking lot. So this
And
would-
maintain it.
and maintain it.
Was there a problem with the land last year, though, I thought?
He didn't like, he felt that the price had risen unreasonably, but we didn't approve this last year anyway.
Right,
So-
no, I know, I know we were looking at it last
Yeah.
year and he was like,
He was, so I let him know that it didn't, it's a project that he wants to see happen, but he also wants to buy it for what he feels is a fair price. But I let him know that we hadn't included it, we hadn't appropriated for it this year, and we hope that the relationship would continue and that we'd revisit in a year. And he said, absolutely. And that was fine with him because he didn't like the price that he had been given on it. And so was
Okay.
hopefully going to work on that over the year to come.
thank you.
The sewer infrastructure project. This would be ARPA money. We talked about this last year as well too. We just received, not Steve, our second tranche. Do we have the full 1.4 some million in our possession now?
Yes, I believe so.
I think we just got like in October, early October.
Yeah, the end of October.
Yeah, this is, and there's an, if you flip a couple pages through, there's an exhibit. Again, this is looking at the McCurry Road trunk sewer, taking it from the North Second frontage road, which passes right in front of LP Motorsports and Nowicki Storage. It would be extending due east from the frontage street all the way across those properties, crossing the Stonebridge Trail, going over to Willowbrook Road. This needs to be updated. It would actually, instead of jogging up the western right of way of Willowbrook, it would cross under Willowbrook and head up north towards McCurry. This is a project that's identified as a need, as a priority on the CIP for Four River Sanitation also. They have appropriated the funding for it as well. They've kind of asked me for an update. Just let them know if we're still going to appropriate, if we're still going to keep it in our budget for next year. And then they'll keep it in theirs. If we don't, they won't.
What's the end user? Who's the end user? What will be the end user of this?
I can't say for certain.
Don't the federal dollar programs, or doesn't the federal dollar program require some kind of identification of who the end user will be?
No, they don't, not in this case. It's water and sewer infrastructure are just specifically called out as eligible expense. Expansion of water and sewer infrastructure are eligible expenses of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars.
I know it can be used for that, but shouldn't there be some specific target, something that we want to serve by?
It's a chicken and egg thing. We're running into it up on Rockton and Willowbrook intersection as well, where we would make the case that the existing condition, in this case, the absence of sewer in Rockton and Willowbrook, an undersized intersection, insufficient turn lanes, that those are impediments to development. And that addressing those issues will make it more likely that the surrounding land is developed. If someone were to come to us wanting to develop property up along Willowbrook and Rockton, especially to the south of Rockton, I don't think we would ever get it approved. I think IDOT could deny it based on the traffic impacts it would have. So it is kind of a chicken and egg.
If we build it, they will come.
Well, hopefully, but you can't, or the corollary, if you don't build it, no one, you need to have it in place to even contemplate a project. So it's tough to attach it to a user. And when you do, you'll never sync up with their timeline, right? If they want to build something, they don't want to say, okay, now we'll wait for you to go through a year-long design and EPA review and approval process. And so it would serve, here's all I know. I know that the big triangle of land there that is south of McCurry, west of Willowbrook, east of the path. I know that there is active discussions between a developer and that property owner, and offers to buy it either in its whole or in two different halves. This is all high-level conceptual discussion, but it would be, the proposal is for a whole mixed-use development there of office and retail, single-family and multifamily, all clustered throughout there. That is somewhat that's gonna be on a wait and see. Sewer being there would be a big carrot in making that go forward. We know that the properties east of Willowbrook, right now, I don't think there's anyone currently, but that's where the MyBoard project was looking to buy some land from Mr. Dwyer.
Went to Texas, didn't you?
Pardon?
You moved it to Texas.
He built a huge thing, and he bought/built a big thing in Rockford as well. He probably has expanded into Texas, but yeah, he did a massive facility down on Harrison in Rockford as well. Anything that he is proposing up here now is much different than what he had initially talked about. It was going to be a complete relocation of the facility headquarters. So its entire dispatch room, an expanded scope of services for truck maintenance. Any thoughts? Those needs have not been met elsewhere. And I think anything you'd be looking at would simply be warehousing, and that is substantially less attractive to us and to any of the other taxing bodies, I think. Now, I think that the property owner to the north of McCurry, there's long been a tentative plat for residential development north of McCurry. We're literally right where Willowbrook Road would hit it, that intersection would continue and it would unfold into I can't remember now, a 30-40 single family home development there. That would be boosted along, so to speak, by the development, by bringing sewer to that property. So it's been what this, I was always taught in my time working for an engineering firm was development follows sewer. Sewer is the prime utility. Sewer is the first thing to get in. And that's the Pied Piper. Development follows sewer. To me, that's what this is an investment of a gifted money that does have some strings attached. And an investment in such a way that could have rewards and down the road development. So,
And you see no competing needs anywhere in the village for those dollars? I know this was before us last year.
Yep.
And it's been near and dear to you. I get that.
Yep.
But let's just say priority.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, are there other needs that we can service to, that we can wait and we can look at?
So here's what I'll say. I'm going to pass the buck and say I asked that same question to Four River Sanitation. And in their eyes, no. In their eyes, this expansion is among the highest, perhaps the highest priority they have up here. They don't have other Roscoe infrastructure improvements in their CIP that would be skipped over for this. Sure, there are still some neighborhoods on septic fields. But that doesn't mean, but I don't think any of those have been condemned yet. That doesn't mean, converting over comes at some cost to them still as well. We would, if that was a project that we wanted to pursue, we could participate in some of that, but that would still result in private plumbing, work on the individual lots and connection fees. And that has to be done by that group to be served by it would have to request that. A majority of the people to be served by it would have to ask for that to happen. That has not happened. So there is no identified residential sewer needs right now.
Groundswell.
Mhm.
And when is the deadline for spending these dollars?
We have to start construction in '04, I think. Forgive me, I don't have it committed to memory. I have it in a notebook, but I think you had to start construction 2 years beyond receipt of the second installment. Maybe 3. No sooner. There was both a deadline for commitment of funds, so essentially saying, in entering in a contract with someone to do work that you'll pay for with this money, and then a project completion deadline. And those were they're separated out by 2 years. So it's like you had to commit the funds by 2004 and complete the project by 2006, roughly.
2024?
Yes, yes. The police department garage. We all said last year that, nope, but we'll talk about it next year. So talk about it again this year. I have it in there. I think I updated all costs by 30%. That's, that cost estimate last time was thought out. That was a design quantity based cost estimate. I don't trust cost estimates a lot anymore. I've been burned by them a lot in the last year. But I bumped this one by 30%. I don't know, what did I take? Did that take me up to almost 500,000, I think? 467, 740. And Meadow Street traffic signals. We've discussed that throughout the year, where the signals on strings and wooden poles at Meadow Street and Roscoe Road. Brandon and I met with the county to talk about it. They acknowledge and agree with the validity of the project. It's their road. They will not be in a position, we've asked them to cost share, they will not be in a position to, they said, if we do that, it'll be a couple years down the road. So that's what they sort of put to us, like, if you want us to try to get approval to pay for part of it, that would take a few years, or pay for it yourself and we'll let you do it. Now, I think I told you, it does require, it's frustrating to me, but it does require some level of intersection design study, even though it's currently a signalized intersection, just putting up better, making them look better and putting up better poles, basically. Like, it's just the fact that we're doing any work gives them a bite at the apple to say, hey, is this all, I don't know, probably helps them determine timing of signals.
Yes, timing, they'll re-look at the turn lanes and things like that, the delays at the intersection at each turning movement. It won't be, well, depending on the funds that we use, and if it's local funds, that won't go through IDOT. So I talked with Carlos before putting this together, and he said, what we would require would not be the level of detail that IDOT would require, but he said that they would, at the very least, want to take a fresh look at the signals in the intersection and all the traffic numbers before approving.
But right now, if you look at the capital fund, just with the projects I outlined there, $4 million, $4.14 million in capital projects. This is a question mark I still have in the budget a little bit of, and Steve will help me figure it out, but we'll figure out what we think that the capital fund budget or balance will be at the end of the year. Right now, I just sort of as a placeholder, I'm transferring in 1.5 million from the general fund to the capital fund. The 1.4 million in there, the ARPA, Steve just explained to me how that has to be handled from an accounting standpoint, and it gave me a headache. We have the money, but we don't have the money. It's not a reimbursement grant. We have the money. But essentially, it is the auditor's opinion that while we have it, it's not ours until we have an eligible project to spend it on. So it's not really considered income yet.
Yeah, the term they used is we have not earned it yet. We have to actually start expending the money before it's considered. So we had to defer 100% of it. So.
For the purposes of committing to a project that's largely semantics, it means something to Steve for how he reports it and accounts for it, but it will also make, it's a variable in you helping me figure out how much I have to transfer from the general fund into the capital fund.
But it is going to be committed so that if one comes up short somewhere else, you can't say, oops, let's shift it.
No,
You're
correct.
stuck
yes.
using it for that.
High-speed fiber. Use it on. Yeah, we're not advancing any fiber projects right now. I want us to, at some point, have a conversation about our reserve policy. I know Joe and I talked about it a little bit. He's going to take a look at the specific language. In these years where we have increased revenues or an increased fund balance, and we're committing a lot of money to capital projects, to me, that skews sort of the intent, I think, of the safety net behind the reserve policy and maintaining 6 months of those, right now, my understanding is it said as 6 months of general fund appropriations. But we transfer a lot of money from the general fund to the capital fund. So that comes up as a general fund appropriations. And that's covered in that comes into play in our reserve policy. So if we are appropriating $9 million, the fund balance, the reserve policy is now 4.5 million. That no longer translates to operating expenses at all. And I'm going to suggest that something that we talk about, either looking at the number of months, 6 months is admirable. We have everyone, so it's good that we have it, but it's a lot. Or we look at what set of expenses does that reserve apply to? Should it apply to all these capital projects, which we simply wouldn't do if we didn't have the money. Right? And so I think it's good to have a safety net for all of our operating expenses, all of our necessary expenses that we know we have to pay on a year-to-year basis. Or everyone can say I'm all wet, but it results in these years of high capital spending. It results in holding back a significant amount of money, maybe more than we intended to. That's all I'm suggesting.
But we also have grants that we're applying for that require some matching dollars.
Yeah.
And if we spend it down, how do you cough up those matching dollars?
I don't want to spend it all down either. I could not agree with you more.
It becomes a matter of guessing,
Yeah.
I suppose, as to what you're going to need if
Yeah.
you should get those grants.
I'm a big advocate of not spending it all down. I absolutely think we should have access to a couple $1 million at a given time to be able to put forward towards matches on these big projects if we have to. Yes.
And I'd like to advance this. It's Carol's frequent tune, the police pension. When we look at that actuary, they're basing those assets on December 31st, when the market was rosy, not so rosy these days. So the rate of return is probably shifted down a little bit. I'm just wondering if that 444,000 that's now recommended is what we want to do, or just add a little more. As I said, it's a tune I sing every year. Because
We are adding
We already
I would
did
like
that with the Rock Energy.
yes,
We've got.
a little, yes, it's a small amount.
It's not a little, it's like 50,
But
60,000.
we're supposed to be 100% funded by the arbitrary year of
And
what?
every year they
2040?
take that to that 100% funded at the end of that period when they do the actuary. So that 444,000 was the amount that we need to fund it. If the stock market goes down, then that amount will go up next year.
As it did this year.
So that's my opinion, but
Well, I agree with you, Steve.
So there's a lot in there. I just wanted to touch on it's the biggest ticket items in there. And if you don't mind, I'm just gonna, like I said, we've started a whole meeting cycle ahead of last year, so I'm gonna ask you to spend some time with it. Look it over. Jennifer, you can send me questions in the interim, collect them, save them up. At the second draft last time, if you remember, we had a whole set of supplemental material that was in response to questions and requests that came from trustees between draft one and draft two. And Steve and I will button up some of the snapshot for end of year. To know but as it stands right now, general fund, and that's with an assumed $1.5 million transfer to capital, go up or down. I'm not gonna be off by $1 million one way or the other on that. But general fund revenues of $7,042,000, and right now expenditures of almost $9 million, $1,977,372. Whatever's mind it is again. We are certainly not, yes, we are. Expenses will outpace revenues. That's only because our fund balance is so high and we have so much money in the bank. We are not spending money we do not have. We're not deficit spending. We are simply spending the money that we have in the bank.
As I glance through this, Troy, are you asking for 2 additional employees, one in Public Works and one in Parks? There's something built in here.
No, it's
an equivalent,
Just,
okay. Sorry.
Troy,
this is for full-time for parks.
just for Parks.
Yes.
Trustee Guston, we're down. You're right. It says 2 new FTEs. That's because we're down 1 in Public Works. So we are not fully staffed. So I'm just showing in our wage projections for the coming year, we do intend to fill that position. But we would like to add an additional full-time employee in the Parks Department. So yes, when you see in both the salary and the wages there under Public Works, it shows a new person that's essentially filling a role, filling up an existing spot. And the Parks will be a new hire in addition to our workforce. I kind of remarked at how the turnover from some older police officers to newer ones result. There's a noticeable difference in department wages because of that.
Well, their entry
Yes, yeah.
as opposed to,
Yep.
we can offer buyouts to everybody at the top.
Is there any immediate questions or directions or charges?
Yeah, I would like to have a clear understanding list of everything that we lease from enterprise across all departments.
Yep, that's easy.
I mean, it's here, there, and everywhere. And a 2 or 3 year plan, what else is anticipated as far as rolling out, replacing, et cetera. I know we have been doing it, and we've been doing it for the last couple of years. So I just would like to know where we are with this comprehensive program.
Chief and I just spoke with Enterprise. Was that this yesterday? Maybe. And yeah, they sort of nudged them. I mean, our regular point of contact is perhaps out of maternity leave right now, and we're talking to her supervisor. And just questions again, you know, that one of the values they bring is wise advice on the best time to sell things. And so we've been looking at we have traverses. Chief and deputy chief have traverses, and they're only 2020s, but again, we might be hitting a sweet spot of maximum return on 2018s. Are they? Okay. So yes,
So just as you did with the parks,
Yeah.
recreation, you know, this is what we're going to be doing over several years. It would be good to see that with the fleets
Yep.
that we have,
and I'll do it comprehensively, not
right?
hidden in different departments. Even when we're still sitting on, you approved that tandem truck for Public Works last year. Much like we did this year with the bucket truck, that's something that we had you approve actually around this time in 2021. It became a 2022 expenditure. We'll be lucky to get it by November of 23. The loader, was it a cat? I mean, the loader. When do you think, when you have an idea when we'll see that?
They pushed it back to mid-November now.
So that's mid-November. So these are things that and that's just the insanity of all this. These are things that you approved and we executed purchase agreements on at the end of 21. And we'll maybe get them in November of 23. But really, other than the bucket truck that you approved, I don't know that we have any other vehicle acquisition scheduled for 2022.
Excuse me, I didn't have time to go through this line by line, but I do remember having a request that we spend some dollars on repairing things in this building. Those lousy chairs, the tile at the front, just some maintenance.
Those chairs are no good.
You don't have to buy 1,000 of them, but just, you know, few that,
No, I printed out, I got
Donna,
sidetracked
we-
by it.
those came to us
got-
used from the fire department ages
Yeah.
ago.
No, I got a whole bunch of cut sheets. I went down a rabbit hole on them I don't know, a month or so ago. And I have a bunch of options. I forgot about it for this, but I have stuff to show you. If you don't mind, let's draw this first rollout to a close, and these are two good things that I'll start working on for the next one, and I trust you all to reach out to me with requests. And if you didn't see, the lights are on the building. I think they're set pink or as pink as I can right now. There's an amazing, unbelievable amount of displays and effects and colors and patterns that we can do. You can schedule them all. I've already scheduled our 4th of July display. I've scheduled some Christmas stuff. I have it as a default to warm white from 4 PM to 2 AM right now. But then anything I schedule on top of that will override that. And looks really good. They did a very nice job on the installation. Take a look on your way out.
Okay.
The old business?
Yeah. Two things. Carol mentioned at the last meeting about the debris being bulldozed over in Denton Alley.
About what being bulldozed?
The trash,
The-
the yard waste, the
Yard
trees
waste.
that they were clear cutting and then piling in various locations. And I think Mark said you had a meeting scheduled and you were going to address it with them or code enforcement. I haven't walked there.
Vic went out the next day. Were you involved in that at all?
I was not, no.
Vic went out the very next day.
Next day and spoke with them.
What's that?
He did, he went out there and looked at them. I think most of it was the yard waste. I think there were a few other things that were out there that they were gonna remove. So I'm not sure they removed them yet, but I know he went and talked to them.
The reason I have a concern, and Stacy, remember this, is when I first came on board, there were piles of old trees and debris, which was put in what is now Chicory Ridge Park.
That's why we wanted to park, because it was turning into a dump.
That's right. And the safety concerns were that children would crawl around in those piles and somehow fall through and become impaled. But,
I guess one of them stayed in there.
so anyway, it's a safety, it really is a safety concern. And that was something.
I know that Vic went out the very next day. I'll email you guys with what occurred and what was taken. He's been great.
And the other thing is my delight in Culver's doing something in the parking lot.
What delighted me last night or 2 nights ago in reading through the P3 settlement agreement for Denali, I realized they owe us $31,000.
In addition to the $5,000 fine,
In addition to what?
the $5,000 they owe us for a fine.
Separate from that. I just didn't realize that in the Plat One redevelopment fund, it established a $50,000 down payment, which they made right away. They pay $750 per zoning application, which they've been doing, but it also had in there that they owe us $30,000 on the first anniversary of that agreement, which is here.
So I really thought that was for our use, that insert. But back to code enforcement, is it possible to add lines within that department for his software, his devices, his supplies, et cetera? So because now this is an enlarged department
Yes.
and those items are not there.
Sure. I I
rather
increased,
than blending them.
I increased a number of line items for office supplies and things, because he is now a regular component of this side of the building. I've accounted for some of that by increasing line items on the village hall side. So no, I don't think I'm gonna create his own supplies line, but a software for sure.
And hardware that he may need, or all of those types of things, so that we can, because I think you projected that this is going to grow in responsibilities, so that if we have those items, those line items, we can provide all the materials that are needed as well as track them.
We've set them up pretty good to start, so I don't know there's much to appropriate for, but we are going through, just so you know, for the, we started to have a series of presentations of Zoom meetings with different companies that have, they started out as a code enforcement software platform for him to use, and I did some initial research. I said some that I thought looked promising. He's reviewed those and set up meetings as a result. But from one we had today, I think it will expand beyond just code enforcement. And I think that anyone that's offering that type of a service, that type of a module through a larger software platform, also has some very interesting things for permit handling, any number of internal processes or interactions with the public. So the product we might be looking at might be something that's significantly more than just code enforcement and help us across the board. That's all. All right. Motion to adjourn, no executive session. Oh, we gotta do public comment. Public comment, no executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Clerk, please just call the roll.
Dunn,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Flock,
Yes.
Malco.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Have a nice evening, guys.